Happy Thursday, Locked On Women's Basketball fans. I know I don't need to say this to you, but WNBA Finals start tonight. So I'm joined by someone very special here for an episode of Locked On. We're going to get into this Minnesota Lynx versus New York Liberty matchup. Locked On Women's Basketball starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Team every day, Locked On Women's Basketball, wherever you get your podcast. Guys, thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen. So happy to be back with you. I'm Gigi Speer, and today I'm joined by Terry Horstman, who is a Minneapolis-based writer, and he covers the Minnesota Lynx. And he's the beat for the next. He also previously wrote about a different Minnesota basketball team, the Timberwolves. And we're going to get into what the facilities are like there out in Minnesota. And also, I want you guys to check out his very own pod, the Belligerent Beefs pod.
Yes.
And we could talk a little bit about that. But Terry, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to see you for game one of the finals tomorrow, or tonight, actually.
Tonight, yeah. We're traveling through time here, Gigi. It's an amazing world that we live in. But yes, tonight, game one. As we speak right now, I am in Minneapolis, but I will be in New York, in Brooklyn for game one of the WNBA Finals at Barclays, and I can't wait. Can't wait to be there. Can't wait to see Ellie again. We had a great interaction at the All-Star game, and I haven't seen her since. So very, very excited. Happy WNBA Finals to everyone tuning in.
Happy WNBA Finals. The whole world has seen Ellie, and I can't wait to see you. And also, I just want to shout out to not only our Locked On Women's Basketball fans, but also one of our sponsors today, which is Game Time. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So, Terry, I'm so excited. I want to go with you and just kind of review this Minnesota Lynx season that's brought us up until this point. So you've written about it. You've covered them this entire season. They had a crazy record, 30-10, right. Commissioner's Cup champions. I mean, this is Minnesota basketball, right? But what was so special about this year?
There are a lot of things, Gigi. It's going to be hard to sum it up in a minute or 10 or 100. I think what sticks out is I think it's the clip I shared with you last night in the post game after, the smoke was still clearing on Minnesota beating Connecticut in the semifinals, and Cheryl Reeve talking about how she maybe didn't necessarily know that this was going to be this group on day one of training camp, but definitely knew by day two. And that was something that was a storyline throughout training camp. We wrote about it. We talked about it. And then, mentioned even Cheryl herself said, everyone thinks they have great chemistry right now. Everyone across the league is happy. We'll see what happens when that gets tested, when you hit adversity, when you have to deal with losses and long road trips and injuries and things like that. So when that building from training camp, the chemistry's only gotten better and better. And I think they just really did an incredible job building around Fee and bringing in, people who fit really well together. I think banking on Courtney Williams and Alana Smith still working really well together after a great year, and not a great year for them personally in Chicago last year. I know it was a trying year for both of them, and Chicago was, one and done in the playoffs, but that has paid dividends and just kind of everything worked. And they banked on Fee becoming an MVP caliber player who would probably be MVP in 90% of WNBA seasons to this point. And it's just all hit really well. And it's been, beautiful basketball and the amazing, series against the Connecticut Sun. So there's so many things that are special about this team, but I think the chemistry and what Fee said last night and what Cheryl said last night about how this team has just played for each other since day two of training camp. I think that's really the first thing that should be talked about when talking about the 2024 Minnesota Lynx.
And already history made for them. You mentioned Fee, MVP caliber. Sadly, other people had, namely Asia Wilson, then MVP, unanimous MVP season. But Fee finishes all defensive first team, defensive player of the year, all defensive second team in Alana Smith. now Coach Cheryl Reeve kind of was grabbing up all the accolades she could along the way.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you more about that culture and that
Mhm.
camaraderie they have. Would you say that there's one player or one person that you would point to as kind of the glue of this team right now?
I mean, it starts with Fee, and Courtney Williams talked about this last night, that when you have a superstar player, like a bona fide superstar player, one of the best players in the world, who carries themselves with the humility that Fee does, that trickles down to the entire roster. And I think Cheryl, as a coach, coaches Fee just as hard in the same way that she coaches Alyssa Peely or Olivia Apupa, or players who aren't getting action in these games, but they are part of the team and part of Lynx culture. And I think this is just a group that really responds to that. Was struck earlier in the season by a comment by Alana Smith, who what Cheryl said earlier in the season, that if Fee hadn't been available when they picked in 2019, they were going to draft Alana Smith. And there was another time in free agency where they almost were aligned with getting Alana Smith, and it didn't happen. And now Alana Smith is here, and she said that 5 or even like 2 years ago, she didn't think she was mature enough to play for Cheryl, but now it's perfect. So I think there's this kind of a good amount of luck, timing, and just a group that's really down with each other and ready to play for each other and, make those personal sacrifices. There's been games where even, Fee hasn't gone off, and like that hasn't mattered. I think game 2, Connecticut defended Fee perfectly, held her to 9 points and 3 of 14 shooting, and the Lynx won that game. So it's just a team that I don't think really cares who gets the credit. And it starts with their superstar, who just has the humility of someone who's still trying to, bust their butt to make the last roster spot. And I think that's, what's carried them through to this point this year.
She's so unrivaled, I would say, Fee. And so you mentioned this series against the Sun. First of all, to start this whole thing, they sweep Phoenix. Was that a surprise at all from you?
Not to me. No, I thought they matched up pretty well with Phoenix. Phoenix has some pretty good firepower, and I think the one thing was, just are like the sports gods and goddesses going to be on the side of Diana Taurasi, like if this is it, which we still don't know. But you saw, Fee scored 80 points in those 2 games. It's not, I don't think even the most diehard Mercury fan would push back on me saying that it's not the most defensive minded team in the WNBA. And just the Lynx are a team that they play, defense, not exactly like the Sun do, but they are a good defensive team, but can also light it up a little bit. So I wasn't surprised to see them sweep the Mercury, and they've been so good at home all year long. So I think they went about that business as usual. You could see when they gave up that 23-point lead, though, in game 1, the tension that ran through Target Center was palpable. It was on a razor's edge, but they responded, they hit back, and they got the job done. And that's what I think all of us who have been on the beat all year were expecting out of them.
And Terry, you mentioned 3 things that I know we're going to touch on in this next segment. One, the Minnesota defense. You can't talk about the Lynx this year without talking about their defense, and you can't talk about their matchup against Liberty without talking about it. 2, their environment at home. And then 3, just the culture of Minnesota basketball and the history that it stretches. But there's a couple things that I want to get to first, and this first segment. So staying with the Connecticut Sun. So that last game, game 5, people might have not wanted it. Fans of basketball, I know I wanted it. They end up winning 88-77.
Sure.
27 and 11 from Fee, 24 from Courtney Williams, to go along with 5 rebounds, 7 assists, and then 19 from Kayla McBride. So just to finish this out in 5 games, what were you thinking watching this game and watching it all go down and watching Minnesota really be who Minnesota is, which is like spreading points across the entire offensive effort?
Yeah. I mean, that is true to kind of how they've been all year. There were a couple stretches of the season where they did lose back-to-back games, but one of them was without Fee. So I wasn't really expecting them to lose 2 games in a row to Connecticut without a fight. And also, if you get the chance to meet Courtney Williams' dad ever, I'm sure he'll be there in New York. Just a lovely individual, so much fun. He came up to me unprompted pregame and said that Courtney's getting 20 tonight, and she almost did that in the first half. So, and Courtney's such a fun player to cover. Such a thoughtful person, and answers questions obviously in a very entertaining way, but is also such a cerebral basketball player as well. And you had to know that after a very frustrating game 4 from her, where she got in foul trouble right away, had to come off, sit for a while. Right when she got back in the game, she got called for another foul that was like kind of 50-50. So you knew she was going to come out strong if you've been watching her game in, game out. So it was just kind of her night. And I think Fee's just like, people keep saying it's like, oh, it was like a quiet 27-11, like you look up and she just has it. But like, I think that's just what people assign to Fee and the way she does things, even though like she's been a little bit spicier this year, as people have noticed. But yeah, I think Fee figured something out after game 2, being defended primarily by Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner. And when other teams are putting that much attention on Fee, it opens up so much for everyone else. And she's surrounded by shooters. Everyone else in that starting lineup is capable of drilling from 3. And when someone has an off night, like the last 2 games, I don't suspect we'll see Bridget Carlton go 2 for 11 or 0 for 6 from 3 very often. But it does happen, even to the best of shooters. And Connecticut did a good job on Kayla McBride earlier in the series, and last night was kind of K-Mac's night. And so it's very unlikely that no one in that group will have their night. And it's just all meshed together, really well. And it's translated into a finals appearance.
We're going to talk about this finals appearance in segment 2. So stay with us, and we're going to just shout out our sponsor one more time, Game Time. Guys, I love going to live events. I will be at a live event tonight with Terry watching women's basketball. I can't wait. It's so much fun. And honestly, any type, I think this year for me going to Liberty games has been just so great. Game Time actually has a feature now called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, for me, any event involving women's basketball, I want to be at. There's so many great deals, and there's a super deal. There's other types of deals, and you could just go through the app. It's such an easy experience, and it's the best way. If you're thinking, hey, last minute, I have nothing to do tonight, let me go check out a game. Game Time has got you. So one of the things that I love is the super deal. And I also love how you could view seats before you buy. It's actually just so helpful. So the seat view, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And all the time you get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Come on, guys, that's a no-brainer. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Terry, we're back. It's almost game time. Game Time is happening tonight. And for me, I'm in New York, so I'm in tune with the Liberty fan base. I feel like I am on the subway and I'm always seeing someone in a Liberty jersey. So I just want to talk about this matchup. The Lynx are 3-1 against the Liberty on the season, including a win in the Commissioner's Cup.
Right.
Oh my. So like, I know today with media, the players were talking, hey, it's going to come down to the post. It's going to come down to defense. It's going to come down to maybe lucky perimeter shooting. What does it come down to? What are you looking for tonight?
I am looking for how the Lynx defend Jonquel Jones, because I'm in the common denominator in the Lynx wins across the 4 times they've played this year. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because there's been a couple of podcasts, I won't name names, that have said, well, I think if the Lynx make it, the Liberty will kind of run away with it. And they still could. Like, I'm not going to say that's impossible, but they've played 4 times this year. The Lynx have won 3 of them. I think they are deserving of some respect here, especially the Commissioner's Cup final, which we know how much the players get up for that game. So the common denominator against those Lynx wins was limiting Jonquel Jones. And in the game that they lost, JJ kind of went ham. And so not that I think that's, the end all be all. They've done a good job, on the perimeter. They've done a good job on Sabrina. Like, even when you do a good job on Sabrina, she can still kill you. So there's just so many storylines and so many matchups, but the Lynx have played as a small team all year. And there's a reason why Alana Smith was honored with second team all defense. She's almost always undersized, and the blocks numbers are pretty good. Rebound numbers they're just all well and fine, but she does so many things when their defense is going well that like don't show up in the box score. And I'm just like thinking about in that first series, limiting, like, I think I haven't looked at the splits, so if the splits aren't good, then you can at me on Twitter, whatever.
Okay.
But Brittany Griner generally shoots like 70% from the field. I think there was a game in that series where she was 2 for 8 against the Lynx, and a lot of that has to do with just Alana Smith and that positioning, and her being tough. And she does struggle with foul trouble at times. So if Smith gets in foul trouble, it's going to be a tough sledding for the Lynx. They did get Dorka Juhas back, who played some decent minutes in the Connecticut series. She was big in their game 3 win, but I don't know how much you want to rely on her if in a moment where, Smith gets, a few fouls. Maisha Hines-Allen was, I think, the best in-season acquisition, not named Marina Mabry, in the league. Maisha's first game was Lynx in Vegas. She flew across the country and had been a Lynx for like 14 hours and played in that game against Vegas. Smith got, I think, 3 fouls in the first quarter, and Maisha just came in and, played Asia Wilson, played Alicia Clark, played, against the Vegas Post, like, perfectly. I think she probably had looked at the playbook at some point like before that, but not for very long. So they have the capability to, defend big and, play big and play strong. So yeah, I think I wasn't necessarily fixed on this going into this segment, but I think I just talked myself into Alana Smith's defense will be one of, if not the biggest difference makers in this series.
And we have to look out for it too. We have to see how deep JJ gets into foul trouble. And I know I have to let you go. And so I'm going to make this final question, sadly, just one word or a couple, because this might be hard.
I can, go a few more minutes, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to kind of I would love to talk about matchups for sure. This might be in a later pod, but
okay.
I want to talk about Minnesota culture and what it's like to be in Minnesota for a Minnesota Lynx basketball game.
Sure.
Because I'm looking even just ahead at ticket prices, they're more expensive in Minnesota than they are in New York, the average price. So yeah, I just want to know what it's like to have those banners hanging from the rafters and like that history.
Yeah, that's a great question. We could probably stretch this into like 5 different episodes or a whole, sub podcast on its own. I think even through the last few years, and I'll answer this as quickly as I can. This is kind of in the piece that I wrote off of Game 5, which I think is being edited right now, which is hopefully clean enough to be published by the time people are listening to this. But where even when the team missed out on the playoffs in 2022 and Sylvia Fowles' last season, a season that Fee missed most of because she was pregnant with her daughter, Mila, who has now become like the most famous person in the WNBA atmosphere, not named Ellie the Elephant.
True.
And that is that while, the names on the back of the jerseys have changed, the standard that comes with the name on the front have stayed the same. And my first thing I ever wrote for the Next was in January of 2023 before last season. And I talked to Fee and about, this new era, like no one from the previous dynasties here anymore. and the team's built around you. Like, how does that feel? And she talked about, it's a pressure, but it's a good pressure. And the goal is to win championships. And all of the outside noise was about like the Minnesota Lynx are finally rebuilding. Like, it's going to be, they should tank for Caitlin Clark, tank again for Paige Beckers, who's from Minnesota. How poetic would that be? And like all of this, like win again in like 2030 kind of stuff. And they were just kind of like, in a word, like bet. And now a year, did like 18 months, less than 18 months after that first conversation, or I guess exactly 18 months, it was, they're in the finals. And I think Reeve made a bet on Napheesa Collier that she could be the best player in the world outside of a historical season from Asia Wilson. And that has come to bear fruit. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And I think you had a player in Fee who showed incredible leadership skills as a rookie in 2019, helped the team, curve kind of, rough waters in the ensuing seasons. And other players thrive under her. Like Bridget Carleton has had a great season, but Bridget Carleton was also great for this team in the bubble when they made the semis. Like, it's not something that's just like, brand new. And other players have wanted to come and play with Fee. And I just think she's that, unique leader who gets the best out of people. And she's mentioned it a couple of times that Syl in those last few years was kind of the Cheryl whisperer, like translating that coaching intensity to a, digestible form for the rest of the team. And I think that's really important when you have a great coach, because great coaches are always just on a completely different level that like aren't necessarily, they don't live in the same world that you and I do. And I think Fee has stepped into that perfectly so that everyone who's getting that hard coaching is using it to the best of their abilities and getting development out of that. And I think that's just really translated into a pretty special season here. And so I think credit should be distributed across the board. And there's maybe a little bit of luck involved and just the stars aligning in a way. But I think just Napheesa Collier being the 6th pick in the 2019 WNBA draft could turn out to be the greatest decision the Minnesota Lynx have ever made. And I think it really could just be as simple as that.
Simple, but not simple at all. Terry,
Right.
Thank you so much for your insight. I think that this is going to be, I know this will be a great series. It has been all year. And thank you for your time. I love shedding light on this team. And I'll leave you with this. One thing that Cheryl, last time I saw her in person, she said to the entire room of media looking to ask her questions in typical Cheryl fashion, she goes, none of you are talking about us. This is right around the Commissioner's Cup. She goes, and we like it that way. We don't want you to talk about us because we're going to make you talk about us. And now here they are in the finals, and you've done a great job reporting on them. So everybody check out all of Terry's work and this new article that's getting edited perhaps right now and as soon as possible.
As long as there weren't too many typos in there. So it's hopefully up as you're listening to this right now, Locked On listeners. So yeah, get over to thenexthoops.com and check it out.
Everybody check it out. All right, Terry, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Gigi. See you tonight.
See you tonight. All right, everybody, we're going to keep this thing going. And I want to shout out yet another one of our amazing, amazing sponsors. And that sponsor is FanDuel. So NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. We want you guys to go head over to FanDuel.com and check it out, everything that they have to offer with bonus bets. All right, guys, this is it. This is WNBA Finals. We're starting tonight. It's Thursday. Game 1 is 8 p.m. Eastern. And what I just got from Terry is something that really has a great foil to the cultural perspective I've been getting from the New York Liberty all season long. Like I mentioned, I'm here in Brooklyn, so I leave my house. I see Liberty fans every single day. And one thing about Liberty fans, they're not ashamed. All Liberty fans rock their gear and rock it proudly. Now, this Liberty team, on paper, you could say is the best team in the WNBA. But can you? Because they've been beaten 3 times by another team that's really good, and they're playing each other in the finals. So I want to talk to you about ticket prices real quick. Game 1, you could get a ticket for $37. Game 2, $56. Game 5, if it happens, $98. Starting price. In Minnesota, it's $108 for game 3 and $184 for game 4. So Minnesota, like I talked about with Terry, has such a rich history. We're talking 4 championships: 2011, 2013, 2015, 2017. Culturally, if Minnesota was to win this year, not only is it putting Napheesa Collier even more on the map, Cheryl Reeve even more on the map, it's also putting the Minnesota Lynx back on everybody's radar. A team that people who might just be getting introduced to the W right now actually have never heard of, believe it or not. You go back to Katie Smith, an all-girl season for the Lynx, 1999. She had WNBA record for threes, 88 in a season. And then this year, Kayla McBride became the first Lynx. And this is all according to Terry's reporting, so make sure you check it out. The first Lynx player and 13th W player to make at least 100 threes in a regular season with 105. Her teammate Bridget Carlton, 91. So it's kind of like a cool full circle moment for them historically. Now for the Liberty side, 5 appearances in the W finals, and not yet have they had a championship. 99, 2000, 2002, 2023, and now 5. A championship? Let's see. Like I mentioned, the Lynx are 3-1 versus the Liberty. Also, the Liberty are very good at shooting the 3. If you go to a game, you don't wait too long before someone's pulling up from behind the arc. Minnesota's defense is that good. So they shot 42.5 from 3 versus Liberty all season long, but the Liberty only shot 24.7. So I know that Terry said we're going to look out for stopping Jonquel, but I'm also going to be looking out. How can Leo Fibich extend the 3? How can the 3 be more of a threat? How can they respond to Minnesota's defense, guys? It all happens tonight. Happy WNBA Finals. Thank you so much for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen of the day. And I want to just encourage everybody to check out, for your second listen, Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Become a fantasy basketball expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Josh Lloyd. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great Thursday and happy WNBA Finals.